not only was I legally blind, but I wasn't very big, fast, strong, or athletic. So I wasn't very good, let's put it that way. But it didn't scare me. I really wanted to play and be a part of something. The thing that I learned, and I think I realized early on, is it wasn't my parents' job to make me great.
Welcome to the Block and Tackle Show, hosted by Karl Block. He'll be tackling some of the biggest issues in business today. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. As you know, I'm Karl Block, host of the Block and Tackle Show. Today, we have a special guest, Aaron Golub, the first legally blind athlete to play Division I football, someone who's defied the odds his whole life. He didn't just play, he led. He was a team captain, and he was an NFL free agent. Now, Aaron is a speaker, an entrepreneur, the founder of one of his new ventures, Precision Search, and his story is about grit, mindset, and pushing past limits. Aaron, welcome to the Block and Tackle Show.
Thanks, Karl. Excited to be here with you.
Thank you. So, since football was a huge part of your life, tell the audience how you got into it.
For me, growing up, I struggled in a lot of ways. In school, in athletics, socially, just being legally blind. And I tried every sport you can ever imagine, from baseball to basketball to soccer, even lacrosse at one point. And I was terrible at every single one of them. And for me, in seventh grade, I found football. I had always loved it and wanted to play, but I knew I couldn't be the positions that every other kid wanted to play. I couldn't be a wide receiver, couldn't be a quarterback. And so at the time, my coach said, Aaron, why don't you play offense and defensive line? All you have to do is knock the other kid over, block them, and we'll play 10-on-10 football. And, that doesn't work too long in your career of football, maybe when you're 12. But that's what kind of got me into it in the beginning, eventually led to, me switching positions and things that we'll get into. But that kind of started it.
So when you're growing up as a kid and you have a sight disability, didn't contact sports ever scare you at all? Did you ever have fear of just not being able to react on time or not knowing what to do in the moment?
Not really. I mean, with football, the positions being a lineman, it's you're hitting the person in front of you. It's
Sure.
not like I had to go chase down the ball. And so that person was always there, within a couple of feet in front of me most of the time, at least. And so it didn't scare me. It was something that I enjoyed doing. I didn't think that I was going to get hurt. I didn't think that it would be an issue. Now, was I very good in the beginning? No. I mean, not only was I legally blind, but I wasn't very big, fast, strong, or athletic. So I wasn't very good, let's put it that way. But it didn't scare me. I really wanted to play and be a part of something.
No, and I totally get that. And we're going to unpack that. But like lacrosse, okay, you got to move fast. You've got to get the ball in the stick. You didn't have any fear of trying it, a fear of failure, nothing?
I was a stupid kid. Let's put it that way. I wanted to play any sport I possibly could. My friends were playing lacrosse. I was like, oh, let's give it a try. Now, was it a good idea? No, absolutely not. I played like one season and I don't think I got in a game. I couldn't play, but it was something I wanted to try. I tried baseball when I was a kid, all those types of things. But, eventually realized that it wasn't, those weren't the sports for me.
I get it. And I don't know if anybody's ever asked you, did your parents, were they a great source of motivation, encouragement, or, hey, get back up and go get them? I mean, how was that when you were going through this?
Yeah, I mean, look, of course, my parents were nervous me playing sports, especially football, but they were a huge part of how I became who I am today. I like to always say how, look, I think when a kid is taking their time with something, if a parents want to get out of the house, let's say as an example, and the kid's trying to tie their shoes, they're 5, they're 6 years old, most parents are going to be like, oh, let me tie your shoes for you, let me zip your jacket. They're going to get them out because they want to get going. My parents would never do that. My parents were always the ones that would take the position of, no, Aaron, go figure it out. They'd stand there and wait. And it's not just about that. It was about, teaching me other things in life as well, pushing me and putting me outside of my comfort zone, because they understood that I had to develop this resilience early on in life. Now, did they love that I played football in the beginning? No, I'm sure they didn't. But it was more about putting me in positions where I could learn, I could grow, I could get better, because they knew I'd have to deal with so many other things later on in life. And if I didn't develop that resilience early, I'd be screwed later on.
Okay, I totally get that. I'm sure a lot of parents would love to hear the message that you just said. So let's look at the football stuff again. Football was the only game you played. You kind of outgrow being an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman when you're 12, and you don't want to quit playing. Aaron doesn't quit. He gets up off the ground, he gets up, and he doesn't quit. So how did you embark on the journey to become a Division I football player?
So the first few years I was playing offense and defensive line. I wasn't getting on the field.
Sure.
By my sophomore year of high school, I was a third string JV athlete,
Mhm.
never touching the field. And at that moment, I just had enough. I knew I wasn't going to be a 300-pound lineman. I couldn't do that. That wasn't me. And so I figured, how can I stop allowing being legally blind to control my life, not only on the football field, but in all areas? And for me, it revolved around, how can I think differently? How can I work harder? How can I work smarter? And the first step was, how do I think differently about the position I play so I can actually get on the field? And I found long snapping. And I realized that this was such a unique niche position that not many people actually wanted to play. And I realized if I got good enough, maybe I had a chance. From there, it was, how do I work harder and smarter? It was waking up at 5 a.m. every day and practicing for an hour and a half before school. It was after practice in the evening, going and lifting weights for an hour and a half, doing what nobody else was willing to do, because I learned that if I could just bridge this gap over time, it wouldn't happen today or tomorrow. But if I could bridge that gap and do what nobody else was willing to do, I would be able to get the results that nobody else was able to get.
I mean, that takes quite a bit of next level thinking for somebody who's a teenager. And I mean, again, there must be a great deal of persistence, not giving up, and just saying, I'm going to figure it out. Because, what you didn't say is, my mom and dad said, hey, why don't you be a long snapper? That, this was you, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, my parents were never the ones who would say, hey, Aaron, let's go practice tomorrow morning. But, every day, if I, and I commend them, if I said, hey, Dad, can we go practice in the morning? Can you go catch my snaps? He would get up and do it. The thing that I learned, and I think I realized early on, is it wasn't my parents' job to make me great. It's no parent's job to make their kids great at anything. It's not. But my parents were very fortunate, or I was very fortunate, that my parents would support me. If I was willing to put in the time and the effort and the energy to make myself great, they would be willing to be there to support me and help me to get where I needed to go through simple things like catching my snaps.
That's a great thing. So now you're in high school, you're looking at colleges. Were you looking at schools for Division I football programs? I mean, how did all this happen that you end up at Tulane?
Yeah. Again, I was a stubborn kid who had no idea what he was doing, and I refused to look at schools that I couldn't play Division I football. I had less than zero interest in playing another school. And there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes I hate saying that because it makes you seem like, oh, no, there's nothing wrong. If you're playing D3 sports, like, that's fantastic. Like, good for you. I have plenty of friends who did that. But in high school, that's just not what I wanted. And maybe I had an ego to a point. Maybe I was just stubborn. I don't know, but I didn't want to. And so my focus was, how do I play at the Division I level? But, college coaches weren't coming at me. I was ranked very highly as a long snapper in the nation and a football player in Massachusetts, but coaches weren't knocking down my door. And so I had to think differently than others. How could I bring them to me if they're not going to come to me? And, I again decided to do what nobody else would do. And so I started picking up the phone and I cold called every single college coach in the country. I started cold emailing every single college coach in the country, started showing up on campuses and football offices, as many as I could, and wouldn't leave until a coach would sit down with me or kick me out, because I knew that I only needed one person to say yes. It wasn't about getting 200 yeses. It was about getting a million no's and one yes.
I get it. And did it emotionally? Did the failures discourage you? I mean, what was that like to keep hearing no, 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 no?
Absolutely. I think especially when you're a kid, of course, it's challenging. It's hard, when coaches are turning you down or they learn about being legally blind and don't want me to play. And of course, that gets draining. But I think the scenario that I like to bring up is, look, if I told you that you're going to get told no 1,000 times, and on the 1,001st time, you're going to get told yes, wouldn't you be ecstatic on the first no, on the 200th no, on the 700th no? Because I know I would be. If I knew that I only had to get told no 1,000 times and then I'd get a yes, of course I'd be thrilled, because I knew the yes was around the corner. And I think at that time, and you could call it confidence, you could call it delusion, I don't know what to call it, but I was so confident that someone would give me a yes that I just would brush it off. I just knew it'll happen. It'll come. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep going. And that yes is right around the corner. But you have to believe that every no is taking you one step closer to a yes.
I respect that determination a great deal. I'm not sure everybody has it. And I think a lot of people could learn from you. And that's beautiful. So at some point, you're in Louisiana. Did you just literally fly down to Tulane to New Orleans and
Oh,
show
no,
up?
after many cold emails and cold calls, I got them to, be interested in me. I went down and visited the school, and then they gave me an offer to go play.
Okay. And so how many, just out of my curiosity, how many emails did you send them before they said, all right, come on down, we'll talk to you?
For them, it was actually a really unique position because it was more than other schools. Because I originally generated a little bit of interest, but then I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, the coach that I was responding to me that showed a little interest, let's just say early in the school year in September, he then, like, I don't know if he went on a medical leave or something happened. And so they were ignoring me for a while, or at least that's what I thought. They weren't getting back to me. And eventually, somehow it got forwarded to someone else, and another coach got back to me. And then we started actually talking, and he was interested. But I probably sent them 20 emails over the course of September through December until I actually got, a different coach to get back to me and hop on a call with me, because I thought at the time they were just busy or ignoring me or whatever. Thankfully, I had that persistence to keep reaching out.
I totally get it. So you enroll at Tulane, fall practice starts, or what was it like with the other guys there? Like they probably hadn't seen a blind long snapper. How was that? How was that working?
I think people didn't know what to expect in the beginning. And the last thing I wanted was people to think that Tulane brought me in to be nice or as a charity case. That's not what I wanted. And
Mhm.
so for me, it was maybe having this chip on my shoulder, but also understanding that every day in practice, in the weight room, on the field, in the classroom, I had to work 120%, 130% every day. I had to show up and show up every single day to prove what I could do to my coaches, to my teammates, to the fans, because I wasn't the same as everybody else. And I wanted people to know that I deserved to be there and I earned my spot there. And so for me, that was doing whatever I could every single day. If we were running things at 50%, I was going at 100%. It didn't matter because I had to prove myself to others. And, thankfully you step into a locker room like that, yeah, it takes some guys time to warm up to you, but if people see you, in August in Louisiana on the field in 100 something degree heat, running with one another and pushing yourself, like you develop 100 brothers really quickly.
I totally get that. I sort of wonder whether any of the coaches say, do you see what this kid Aaron is doing? What are you doing? Did they ever do that to the rest of the team?
I remember one instance when we would always have, before games, what we would call like the launch pad. And so it's in the middle of the field around the 50-yard line. And if the defense is on the field, the offense would kind of line up in this launch pad based on where they're going to line up on the field, the lineman, the quarterback, because you want to have your first team offense or first team defense or whoever, the field goal team, whoever's going to be up next in this area so they're ready to run on. And, so they had designated spots and then there were cones around it. And one time, even though I'm legally blind, I noticed that there was a cone like out of position or whatever. Everything was supposed to be straight. And I reached over and I moved it. And one of the strength coaches came over to me and made a comment of like, the fact that you can barely see and you just about how my attention to detail in that scenario where, there's 100 other guys on that sideline and no one else picked up that cone and moved it. And it's the little things like that that I think impress others when you're willing and able to go above and beyond, because at the end of the day, the little things matter.
I agree with that. I think that's a great point. So you got elected captain your senior year, right? So
Yeah.
that must have felt really good at the time. And how did you feel about the responsibility? And, for the guys in your class, maybe the juniors, maybe even the sophomores, they got used to you. You got freshmen coming in, okay? Young kids, not necessarily mature, and they're seeing that there's a captain of the team who's legally blind. Did that present challenges?
So yes. And to back up a second to answer your question, my team at Tulane, my freshman year and sophomore year, we went 3-9 each season.
Mhm.
And when you go 3-9 each season, your coach gets fired. And the head coach got fired and it put me into this position of fear. But I eventually got the chance. I went to the new coach's office, even though I didn't want to. And I had this conversation with him. And he had never worked with someone like me, but he was willing to give it a shot after we talked. And that's all I could ask for. And we came to this agreement that we'd try spring practice. We'd try summer. If it worked out, awesome. If it didn't, we'd have this conversation again. If we had to part ways, we would. And my focus from then on out wasn't how I could be the best player. It was how I could add the most value, how I could be a tiny piece in turning this program around whether it be in the weight room, pushing guys to have more weight on the bar. If someone's struggling running sprints, how do I push them and pick them up? If someone needs help in the classroom, how do I help them? Things like that. And I just tried to develop myself into the best leader and teammate I could by adding value to others. And I think because I was able to do that, I was a small piece, I'm not going to say a big piece, but a small piece in shaping and turning around the culture of that program, of that team. I think that trickled down to, the juniors, the sophomores, the freshmen that were coming in, because 2 years later, my coach and I never had that conversation again. He named me a team captain. And I think it was by doing those things every day that helped to shape the culture of what people thought and believed within that team.
And did this process, did it come natural to you, or did the coaches say, hey, do this, this will, these are leadership skills? Do you just have a talent at this, or is it your determination? What do you think it is?
I wouldn't say a talent at it. I like to say, look, in high school, I was not a team captain of my high school football team. And transparently, senior of high school, I was pissed off about it. I thought I deserved to be. But at the end of the day, when you look back on it, yeah, I was the hardest working person there. And I pushed myself. I was in the gym when nobody else was there. But was I really pushing others? And was I really helping others? And was I really being a good teammate? And, maybe not. And I think what I realized in college was I developed myself in this player, and that's great. But that's not what's going to take me to the next steps in life, whether it be on the field or off the field. And learning other skills is what allowed me to do that. Learning how to be a good teammate, learning how to be a good communicator. The best leaders are the ones who can push people when they need to be pushed and pick people up when they need to be picked up and helped. And that's what I had to learn and transition to, because I realized it was no longer just about me. If I wanted to spot on this on the team still, if I wanted the program to do well, if I wanted to start winning games, I had to turn around myself if I could help turn around the team.
That's very well said. And maybe we should talk about this on a broader level. So, because college isn't forever, you've developed leadership skills, you graduate, and then you go into life. So as a leader, what was your toughest moment? What was the hardest thing for you to do as a leader, whether in college or not? And how'd you deal with it?
That's a really good question. There's so many different moments, but I think for me, taking those skills that I learned from football and trying to translate them into running a business. After college, I started my business as a speaker, but I also worked at a financial firm because, you're 22 years old and you have to make an income to support yourself. So when my business wasn't where it is now, I had to have a job, and I had to learn how to translate the lessons I learned from corporate, from football, how to lead others on a team setting so I could run my business, how I could deal with growing a business, how I could deal with employees, how I could deal with just that team. Because people like to say that, athletics translates to business or to, the life after sports. And it does in some scenarios. It taught me dedication. It taught me commitment. It taught me consistency, and teaches you leadership to an extent. But at the same time, you cannot just take any random D1 athlete and say, okay, cool, here's a business, run this team. Like, no, they're not going to know how to do that. And I think for me, it was a very steep learning curve in the beginning of how do you treat employees? How do you work with employees? What do you need to do? How do you delegate? And that was challenging in the beginning, not knowing what to do. And I'm still learning. My business is still growing. There's new challenges every day. But I think that's the biggest for me, is learning how to actually run a team.
And did your vision shape any approach to leadership in particular?
I wouldn't say. Yes, I do things a little differently because of my vision. There's certain aspects of, how I communicate to others. I love just sending voice notes that some people hate. But, for me, when I'm talking to my team or if I'm sending them a Slack message, oftentimes I'll just pick up my phone and do that because I don't feel like typing. It takes me a lot longer. But it's little things like that and figuring out what works best for everyone. That might work well for me, but maybe someone else on my team it doesn't work well for. And so for me, it's figuring out what works well for everyone, or each person individually, to make sure that we can communicate the best possible.
It's funny that you say that, because there's a lot of people who they discuss the concept of meeting people where they are, but they don't necessarily execute it. They don't think about how to execute it. And what you just said, I think, is a classic leadership example. Why send messages to people in a format that they cannot stand, and it makes them inefficient or, aggravated, when you could do something that makes the team better.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's like you exactly just said. It's how do you meet someone where they are to succeed? And instead of focusing on their weaknesses, how do you focus on their strengths and amplify those strengths?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So when I know that part of what you do, because you do a lot of things, is you do leadership training. How do you do that? What's your approach to leadership training when you go into companies and help do that?
Yeah. Every company's different. Every event is different. Sometimes I go into a school and work with, professional development or high school kids. Other times I'm going into a Fortune 500 company or a sports team. And for me, it starts with what I call a needs assessment, understanding what's actually going on, how I can help, how I can support, coming up with the stories from my speaking engagements, coming up with the activities that match what they need. I have some companies that I go to, and their biggest issue is communication amongst teams and working together as a cohesive unit. And so, one company I worked together back in February for an event like this, where it was a mix of a speech and a workshop. I made sure that one of the activities we did was I have these goggles that simulate my vision. We had people come up and try them on, and we're doing activities with them. Maybe the first group couldn't communicate and they were just tossing a ball back and forth. As you can imagine, it's going to hit them in the chest or in the arm. They're not going to catch it. The next group can communicate a little, and the next group can communicate as much as they want, where they're going to throw it, when they're going to throw it, where to stand. And the more you communicate, the easier it is to catch it. And so it's doing things like that based on what they're looking to get out of it, how we can make those activities, those lessons resonate. If a company needs to focus more on empathy and understanding, it's how do we take my stories, my background, and integrate and weave that in so they can get lessons out of it. But it's always a combination of here are the base keynotes or base workshops I have, and then how do we tailor them to your specific situation because every company is different.
That's very pragmatic, and the idea of such a common sense lesson. Again, not everybody would think of that. So tell me though, a big part of what you do, it's just so obvious, is you just have grit and determination. And I think you know that you're on the high side of the bell curve, maybe even outside the bell curve. It's obvious from how many emails you would have sent out to become a Division I athlete. How do you cultivate that? What would your message be to people about how they could have the grit and the determination that you have?
It's a great question. I think most people have this perception of what it's going to take to succeed. And they do that and they don't succeed and then they give up. Success doesn't come overnight. It doesn't come in a week. It doesn't come in a month. Whatever you think it's going to take to succeed, multiply it by 10. And if you're willing to do that, that's how you win in sports, in business, in life, in anything. It's about the effort and time that you put in. It's not just about working harder. It's about working smarter too. Are you doing the right things in the right times? Are you thinking differently and working differently? But too often in today's society, people do the bare minimum. And when they do the bare minimum and they think they're doing a lot of work, they think they're doing what it takes to succeed and they don't get the results, they get upset and they quit. But it's the people who work the hardest and the smartest together. It's not just about working hard. It's not just about working smart. The people who work hard and smart are the ones who win because they go above and beyond what others aren't willing to do.
That's very profound and an incredible answer. I think that, maybe another way to say this is that you may have a person, not Aaron, a person may have an idea of what it takes to succeed. They might be wrong. They will have a setback. Are they going to overcome the setbacks? Are they going to recalibrate and come back and say, okay, that didn't work. What else could I do? And your fundamental thought about you got to go above and beyond. Who doesn't have setbacks? Who hasn't had a setback that they had to overcome? But if you want to be a leader or you want to be successful, what do you have to do?
Yeah. No, and I think too many people going off of that focus on what I call external motivation. They focus on the external world and they bring that into their leadership, they bring that into their life, they bring that into their team. Oh, someone thinks we should do it this way. Someone said we can't do this. That'll only take you so far. And don't get me wrong, if I'm going to go to the gym, tomorrow I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to squat. When I'm putting that bar on my back, I'm going to think of external motivators that piss me off for a few minutes so I can squat that heavy weight. But 99% of the time, if you want to succeed long term, it's focusing on that internal motivation, that internal why. Why do you want to do it? Well, I wanted to play football at a high level because I wanted to do it. It wasn't about the external noise. I want to succeed in business because business is fun for me. I enjoy it. I would do anything to succeed in business. I don't want to go back to a normal job at a 9 to 5. It's my internal why do I want to do it, but it's not focused on that external factors. And I think when you have a strong enough why, when you have a strong enough internal motivation, it becomes a lot easier for you to succeed. And oftentimes, people just haven't found what they want to do bad enough. And once they do, it becomes a lot easier to push themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. And that journey, finding out the whys and what you really want, it's not easy, as you've basically said. It's especially not easy these days.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's great that you recognize it.
Karl Block is both a corporate lawyer and a corporate restructuring partner. Nothing in the podcast should be construed as legal advice.
If you want more info on the show, please visit blockandtackleshow.com. And you can also email me at carl@blockandtackleshow.com. Thanks for tuning in. Are they going to overcome the setbacks? Are they going to recalibrate and come back and say, okay, that didn't work. What else could I do? And your fundamental thought about you got to go above and beyond. Who doesn't have setbacks? Who hasn't had a setback that they had to overcome? But if you want to be a leader or you want to be successful, what do you have to do?